Well, the first thing in the Army, that I was in the Signal Corps, and they used to use the black soldiers to pick up the telephone poles for the white soldiers. And I resented this. And most of all, in fact, most of us resented it. And so we started to rebel against it, and we started to refuse to go into the field. And I was given some time for this. In fact, I was sent to Stockade. But later they transferred me and made clerk, company clerk. But my first problem started with discrimination in the armed service. The fact that blacks were not treated as first-class soldiers, but we were treated more as a labor battalion.
And let me see you turn a little bit your chair that way.
Well, wasn't that though part of the society? How did you deal with that? You had come out of a society that treated people like that anyway, right? So why would you expect for the Army to treat you any different?
Well, I really had some problem before then, because during the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt, they had, when I was in school, elementary school, and first junior high school, that they had what they call the NYA, National Youth Administration, and it was a program wherein they were supposed to train youth. And as a result of this, in the summer after school, they were supposed to give us technical training, and they were supposed to train us as stonemasons. But what they did, they took the black students to a rock quarry, and they had us to dig the stone for the white students. We resented that, and I led a strike against that quarry. And as a result of that, they did fire one of the managers. But after then, they sent me away to a school, to a technical school where I could be trained, really trained. But it had started then. From that demonstration, I didn't know it at the time. But since I've received my freedom of information, I found out that I've been under observation since I was 15 years old. And I didn't know they had such a thing in this country. But what they have said was that because I had led this strike and created a problem for them, that I should be observed in the future as a possible source of troublemaking.
Was your did you have a background in activism? Was your family active, or were you the first to kind of step out and do things?
No, my grandfather was active. He was one of the first black teachers in that county. He came out of slavery literate, and he went to a school called Biddle, which is now Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he was somewhat of an agitator. Then I had an uncle who came out of the First World War, and he was called an atheist. And as a result, he had created a lot of problems in the community, and he had some problem with the police, even though he was a principal of a school.
Well, give us a kind of a flavor of what it was like to grow up in North Carolina, and in a society that had two very rigidly defined do's and don'ts if you were African American, and how you dealt with that, and how you lived with it, and how you thought, is this ever going to change? In other words, did you have hope at that time? It seems, you know what I mean?
No, I didn't have any hope, and I couldn't understand it. The fact is that I grew up in the same town as Senator Jesse Helms. Senator Jesse Helms' father was the chief of police, and he unleashed terror against black people in that community. And I remember on one occasion that I had gone to the post office, and I saw Senator Helms' father, Chief Helms, dragging a black woman who had been drinking, dragging her up the street by one leg, and she was screaming on the ground. And the black men turned away, some went into the alleys, and some turned around to keep from seeing what was going on. and I couldn't understand the fear on the part of these black men. And I was 10 years old, and that's been with me ever since. And I just felt that when I should grow up, that I would never be that kind of a man. And that had a lasting impact on me. Plus the fact that I remember one case where Senator Helen's father had kicked a black man. And the black man was sitting on the curb with his son. He was from the country. And with his little boy. And they were eating watermelon. And Chief Helms came along and kicked him off the curb. And this black man had a knife, and he tried to cut Chief Helms. He cut the collar off his uniform. And I remember as a child, all the men and the people in the community were saying, oh, they had to stay in that night, oh, there was going to be trouble, and the Ku Klux Klan was going to come through, and how it would be dangerous for any black to be seen. Some people even put the lights out in their houses, and they pulled their blinds. And I remember that, but it was a form of terror on their part, but I wasn't terrified. I just couldn't understand what that was all about and why.
How did your philosophy and your stand affect your later activism? Tell us about that. Coming back from the war, tell us what happened when you came back.
Well, I was in the service twice. I was in the Army, and I was drafted in the Army. Later, I was in the Marine Corps. I volunteered for the Marine Corps because I didn't have enough GI Bills to go to law school, and they had said that anybody who would volunteer for the Marine Corps, they would get 4 years in the university. But they also said that whatever that our aptitude called for, we would be assigned in the Marine Corps. And my aptitude testing showed that I should be in information services, which was propaganda. And I didn't know at the time they didn't have blacks in propaganda in the Marine Corps. So they refused to give that to me. And that created a problem because they wanted to make me a supply sergeant, and I refused to accept it. Then I was told by white officers that I came into the Marine Corps as a ditch digger. They meant black, and this was reserved for black people, and that's the way I would go out. And finally, because I created such problems with them and writing senators and to Washington, until they put me out of the Marine Corps. So I came home then with the feeling that we really didn't have a chance, because in the Marine Corps they taught us that we were there to defend the rights of others, to have justice, to have democracy. And I had been taught that all the way through school. In the elementary school, even though we were black, they had us every morning to swear allegiance to the flag and to come in and talk about our patriotism. But we were black. Then they were bringing the books, the school books, from the white schools. We could see the names of the white kids. We got all of the used books, and we didn't have any buses. This is why I can't understand now why white people are opposed to buses, because they had all the buses and we had to walk. And all of these things that I remembered, and they had to do with my resentment of the system.
How did you know what to do? I mean, there were no avenues at the time, right? You said you wrote Congressman, you made trouble. How did you decide to make trouble? How, in other words, what were the, how did you find out what to do to make trouble? In other words, do you know what I'm asking?
I found out where the strength of the United States was, and that was in the gun. And that's how I found that was the one thing that all kinds of people could understand. Even the savage can understand the use of a gun. And the fact was that they had all the guns. When we came home, we submitted because they had the guns. They had the source of violence, and we didn't. And I realized in order to compete with them and to make them understand that we had to create power of our own. And so as a result of that, what I had learned from the military service, I felt that we needed the gun. That gunpowder was all powerful. in this country and in the world. So that's how I reached that conclusion.